Good morning, everyone, or afternoon or evening, depending on where you are. My name is Rachel. Thank you for joining me for today's webinar. I am a senior qualitative research mentor here at Statistics Solutions. We are a full-service dissertation consulting and editing company. We are here to help you with any stage of the dissertation process. So from topic development all the way through to your final PowerPoint presentation for your defense, if you need help with that, and really everything in between. So we have specialists on staff to help with your research, your literature review, research methods, both qualitative and quantitative, all of that. We also have a number of awesome free resources available on our website, statisticssolutions.com. So definitely take a minute to poke around the website. We've got a great blog with discussion and answers to really any questions that we've gotten in the years that we have been doing this work. We also provide a complimentary consultation. It's designed to get to know you and your research a little bit better and see how we can help you out on the dissertation journey. So you can schedule that using the link here. You can also do that through our website as well. I have Brittany with me who will be helping me out behind the scenes in case of technical difficulties, answering any questions related to what we do here at Statistics Solutions. So if those come in during the webinar, go ahead and ask those. We can get them answered. This webinar specifically is on qualitative results. So the focus is qualitative research. I don't do anything related to literature review or discussion or introduction in here. I also don't cover anything related to quantitative methods or results, nor do you want me to, because that is not my area of expertise. So we do have lots of other webinars, again, available on our website. You can get signed up for those if you do have questions about topics like literature review or quantitative methods of design. As I said, I'm Rachel, I'm a senior qualitative research mentor here. This is the webinar on confidently presenting your qualitative results chapter. Let's get started. So this list is not necessarily exhaustive, and for some of you might actually be a little more thorough than what you need for your results chapter. But generally speaking, in the years that we've been doing this work, what we have seen from different schools is that these sections are the sections that should be put into your qualitative results chapter. So your introduction, setting, demographics, data collection, data analysis, results, trustworthiness, and summary. Okay. If your school doesn't have a template or checklist for you to use, if you're not sure sort of where to get started, what needs to go into this chapter, this is a really good starting point. And if you include each of these sections, you will be prepared or overly prepared. Okay. The caveat is if you do have a template, okay, you always want to defer to whatever your school wants you to use. So if your school has a template, if your chair has told you that other different settings need to be included, then make sure to use that. Okay. But this is a good guideline. So in your introduction, and we'll touch on each of these sections. In your introduction, you want to restate the problem and the purpose of your study. Okay, just as you have everywhere else that you've stated these in your dissertation. So these need to be verbatim. Everywhere you write your purpose statement, you write it exactly the same way. Words have meaning, and even words that we want to mean the same thing don't always mean the same thing, right? So the synonyms might still be a little bit different. So restate the problem and purpose of your study in the introduction, again, using exactly the same language for that purpose statement. You want to remind the readers of your research questions, okay? And then preview the chapter. What are the major sections that you're going to include in the chapter? And the hint is what we saw on the last slide, right? So those are the major sections that'll come up in the chapter. What I always like to think about is you're leaning back, you're looking back, okay? You're holding the reader's hand and you're looking forward, right? So if your reader comes in just at the introduction to your results chapter, they have what they need to make sense of the results chapter because you've restated your problem and purpose and your research questions, and you've presented them with a roadmap. It's not a guessing game here like other types of writing, right? There's no surprise. It's here's what I'm going to tell you, and then you tell them in the chapter, and then in the chapter summary, you tell them what you've told them. Okay, so think about reading, holding the reader's hand. In the settings section, and this might look, some of these sections might actually look a little bit similar to sections that you wrote in your methods and design chapter. That is because this is where you are given the opportunity to talk about how things changed. What didn't go according to plan? What did go according to plan? But you proposed a specific design, your methods, your methodology in your methods chapter, and things don't always go according to plan. Okay, so here is where you get to talk about that. This is also where you set up the context for your reader and what they need to know to understand the results of your study. So the research setting, anything that was important about it. Where did you conduct your research and why did you conduct your research there? Any conditions that influenced your research, like, I don't know, global pandemic that sort of changed everything for you. Any conditions that influenced your participants. Again, perhaps a global pandemic. Anything that may impact the interpretation of your results. Okay, there are lots of things. You know, it doesn't just have to be a global pandemic, right? There are lots of things that can change. That's perfectly normal. This is where you get the opportunity to talk about those. Include a section on your participant demographics. Okay, this is information about your participants, characteristics that are relevant to the study, relevant to understanding, again, the context of the results. Okay, so you may consider a participant sketch, you know, that might make sense for your design, where you write a couple of paragraphs about the background of each participant. And if you do this, that's fine. You just want to think about, okay, you know, how do you maintain confidentiality? Are there aspects that you know about your characteristics that you know about your participants that you would want to leave out of this because they might be too identifying for someone who's reading it? But, you know, you want to think carefully about what makes the most sense to present, you know, so maybe a participant's age isn't necessarily important for understanding the results, but perhaps if you're doing some type of, you know, organizational study, leadership study, maybe it's important that we know how many years your participants were working at an organization. Okay, so you want to think carefully about what makes the most sense to present, and then do that in the demographic section. You'll also include a section on data collection, again, similar to what you presented in your methods chapter, except in this case, talking about the specifics of how the data collection process moved along. So the number of participants that were included, you probably had a target number in your sample, maybe it was a range. Maybe you said you were going to interview 12 to 15 people and recruitment efforts were, you know, didn't work out the way that you anticipated. And so you were able to recruit 11 participants, and that's fine. And you talk about that here. You want to talk about the location where data were collected, the frequency of data collection activities? Did you conduct observations of a work site or a classroom? Did you do that 3 times across 3 months? Okay, all of that information is important. How you recorded the data, that's another thing to talk about. Again, any variations from what you planned, proposed to do in your methods chapter, okay, and anything unusual that happened during data collection. So again, think about, when you want to think really hard about your specific study, what is most important to present for someone to understand the context of your results, to understand your results, okay? And if it is pertinent, then that information goes into these sections. In the section on data analysis, again, this is somewhat similar to your data analysis plan from your methods section, but whereas in that chapter on your research methods, you have identified the plan that you're going to use, okay? In this section, in your results chapter, in the data analysis section, what you want to do is talk about how you applied that data analysis plan to your data. Okay, so specific to your study. How did you analyze your data? How did you move from codes to categories, whether those are themes or superordinate themes? And that terminology is going to vary depending on what data analysis or what overall research design you used. But the process of data reduction, moving from codes to categories, describing and defining the codes and categories that you identified in your data analysis. Okay, so this is a more detailed look at how you apply the data analysis to your data. This is also where you want to mention how you handled any discrepant cases or negative cases. So these are those instances where there's a pattern, but not all participants fit the pattern. Okay, if there's something that maybe paints a little bit of a different picture, or if all participants seem to experience an event the same way, except for one participant who doesn't, how does that factor into your analysis? And so you want to talk about that here in this section. And I will say again, as a reminder, you want to always defer to what your school says needs to go in here, because this section in particular, this data analysis section, is one that, depending on the school, can vary a little bit. So sometimes you will include this section in your methods chapter, okay? Whereas other schools, you include this detailed discussion of how you analyzed your study data in your results chapter. So again, always make sure that you're following what your school wants. The main component of this chapter, if all other sections are left out, this is the section that you need, your results, okay? There are different ways to present and to organize your results. This is one that you just kind of have to think about in terms of what makes the most sense for your study. And perhaps it doesn't even make sense for your study to organize your results some way. Perhaps your school just tells you, we want to see results organized by research question. And so that's what you do, okay? You can organize your results by research question, so if you have 3 research questions, you go 1, 2, 3 and present your results that way. It may be the case that it makes more sense to present results based on themes. If you've conducted a thematic analysis or an interpretative phenomenological analysis where you have superordinate themes and subordinate themes. So it might make sense to organize based on that. You could use kind of a combination of, themes and research questions. So again, there isn't kind of a hard rule here, but like everything else in your dissertation, the presentation and the organization needs to be logical. So it needs to make some sense in the context of your research. When you are presenting your data, no matter how you decide to organize it, okay, qualitative data is, narrative data. So most of the presentation of your results should be your own words. Okay. What you want to do is use supporting quotes from your participants to illustrate your points that are in your own words. So if you have conducted interviews as your form of data collection, then that'll be excerpts from participants. Perhaps you conducted a case study where you have data from, a couple of different forms of data collection. Maybe you've conducted a document review or you have observational data. And so in that case, you would support your results, right, and your narrative about your results using excerpts from documents, or if you have photographs from observations, you could use those as well. So you want to discuss the data, interpret the data if appropriate. And I say if appropriate because usually the discussion and interpretation comes in the discussion chapter, where you place your findings in the context of the literature. But there are some qualitative research designs like interpretative phenomenological analysis, or IPA, where that word interpret is in there. And so in IPAs, interpretation is part of the presentation of the results. Okay, so again, what makes the most sense for your study in the context of your study. But always, again, paying attention to, is this logical and is it clear to the reader? Okay, so holding their hand, looking back to what you've written before and moving toward what's coming next. Okay, everything is logical. Again, no surprises. It's not the time for that. Just making sure that everything is very clearly and logically presented. So I mentioned before the term, discrepant case or negative case, and in the data analysis section, and oftentimes in your methods chapter too, you want to outline how you plan to handle or analyze these discrepant cases. Again, these are circumstances where you have a case or a participant who doesn't quite fit the pattern in, usually it's just sort of like one way, but, maybe just completely different from all of your other participants. And so we don't toss those aside, right? They're not outliers in the way that we might think of outliers in, quantitative data, right? They do tell us something. Okay, so we want to talk about and discuss in this section what it might be telling us. Maybe there is an overall story or pattern that's going on in your results, but one or two people have a very different experience. Well, that tells us that, not everyone experiences the same thing the same way. And we know that just anecdotally as human beings, right? But it also, shows us that there is some variation in the range of experiences. It might point us to alternate explanations. Okay, so you can kind of think through what it might mean that people have different experiences, that we do see these discrepant cases. And so when I say discuss in the context of the category, what I mean is, usually it's not that you have, say, one participant who is just totally different in all areas from your other participants. So let's say you've conducted a thematic analysis and you have 5 themes that you're presenting, and you have a discrepant case related to one of those themes. So when I say discuss in the context of the category, I mean, you would, if there's the discrepant case in theme 2, then that's where you would discuss the discrepant case. Okay, so it's not an overall situation. It could be, and then you would discuss the variation maybe in, if it is across all 5 themes, then discuss in theme 1 how, what that discrepant case looked like, and the same for 2 and 3 and 4 and so on. You can also visualize your findings and present in visual format some of your findings, some of your results in this chapter, okay? Tables, figures, maps, drawings, all of them may have a place in your results chapter. Tables, most commonly I see, but oftentimes not a lot, I think because, tables get associated with numbers and numbers don't get associated with qualitative research, but tables do have a place, as do all of these other ways to visualize data, okay? So the main thing that I would say here is if you want to use any of these, do so sparingly. Make sure that they enhance what you're presenting. Don't use them as page filler. We're beyond that at this stage in our lives. Don't use them as page filler. But make sure that they really enhance what you are describing and discussing and help really illustrate a point for the reader. Okay, so use them sparingly. When you use some of these visualizations, though, the other thing that you need to do is make sure that you describe them in the text. Okay, your reader needs to know why you have a table of participant demographics. So just roughly, sketch out in table, X, participant characteristics are presented. You don't just put a table in and not tell the reader why it's there, or a map, or a drawing, okay? So there needs to be some description in the narrative, in the text, showing why you're using that visualization. You'll also include a section on trustworthiness. Again, another section that kind of goes back to your methods chapter where you outlined the ways in which you will establish trustworthiness in your study. So those sort of 4 tenets that you hear about a lot in qualitative research: credibility, transferability, dependability, confirmability. All of those you've probably touched on in your methods chapter about how you plan to establish trustworthiness. So in the results chapter, again, this is where you get to describe what you actually did. So how did you establish each of these tenets of trustworthiness? And I realized that the way that this slide is written, I've sort of made it seem as though triangulation can only be used to establish credibility, that these are mutually exclusive techniques, and that's not the case. Okay, so whatever you use to establish trustworthiness, you describe that in this section. In your chapter summary, you want to highlight, again, your findings, your results. What are the key takeaways? If someone only read the summary of this chapter and, needed to get an idea of what your study was about, what would they need to know? Okay, so that's what goes into the summary. It's like, in some ways you can think of it about it like the elevator pitch, right? So what are those key points just distilled down to the summary? What were the key findings? Paint a picture of what you found, right? But then you also, again, looking ahead, want to provide a transition to the next chapter, okay? And preview that a bit. Here's what's coming up in chapter 5, or in your discussion chapter, it might be a different chapter number. So if you include all of these sections, like I said, you're in really good shape, okay? But I realize that some of you are probably in this webinar because it's not even about what sections do I need to include in the results chapter. It's probably You're here because you're so overwhelmed and don't know where to start on like a more like philosophical level, right? And I totally get that too. And so I have some tips for you on that. The first thing is you are the boss of you. Okay. You can believe that or not. What this means is that you can start this chapter anywhere you want, anywhere that feels comfortable. Okay. The results chapter is challenging for a couple of reasons. The first reason, and I think the main reason that it can be so tricky, is that it might have been a couple of years since you wrote your proposal. It might have been a couple of years since you collected your data. You know, life happens. My program took a very long time. Part of that was because of the nature of my own program and the discipline and my background. But graduate school can take a while, right? Things happen, interruptions, pandemics, children, moves, divorces, all of that. Okay, so for whatever reason, maybe it's just been a while since you've been in the habit of writing and researching. Okay, so be gentle with yourself, is what I'm saying, and start wherever it feels good. Okay, now some of you might be the kind of people who find it helpful to write an introduction first, because that's going to present your roadmap for the chapter. And if that's you, that's awesome. Go ahead and do that. Start with your introduction. Okay. Some of us don't work like that. That's not how I work. Okay. It's not sort of the way that my brain works. So I generally like to come back to the introduction, right? I generally like to start with somewhere in the middle. And then once I have all of that on paper, then I know how to introduce it. And if that's you, then do that. Okay. But you're the boss. You don't have to start at the beginning. Okay. The other thing is, if you're feeling really overwhelmed by this chapter, you don't have to start with a sort of heavy, like lots of thought required section. Okay. So if you are feeling good and you want to, you know, you're like, yes, I'm going to, you know, write up all of theme 1 and the sub themes today, and, you know, you're just like on it and you're feeling good, then do that, you know, because that's going to have a really good effect. You're going to get that done. You're going to feel good. It's just that like positive feedback loop. But if you don't feel like doing that and you feel like doing what I like to call TV work, so the stuff that doesn't take a lot of brain space that you can do while you've got like Netflix in the background, like making a table for your demographics, right? Do that too. It can be low-hanging fruit. You need to make that table, okay? So just because you're not feeling amazing and awesome and highly motivated doesn't mean that you can't make steps toward the mountain. You're still getting there. And once you get that table done, or whatever your low-hanging fruit is, once you get that done, again, you're into that positive feedback loop. So it's just going to keep going. Okay. Remember, you can't wait for motivation, right? We all sort of know this. It doesn't come. You got to just go get it. But you can get it in whatever way feels good and makes the most sense. Okay. A couple of other tips are on free writing and on brainstorming. Do not underestimate the power of a good free writing session and a good brainstorming session. So one of the things that I did when I was writing was, and I had this, you know, I had this luxury, this privilege of having my own office. And so I could go in there and lock the door, turn off my music, turn off whatever. I set a timer for 15 minutes every morning, and I allowed myself to write I wrote on my computer because that was what worked for me. I allowed myself to write for 15 minutes, absolutely censor free. I know that is hard for most of us who have written a dissertation or who are writing a dissertation, because we want everything to come out perfectly the first time, and that just isn't how writing works. First, you have to make a mess and then you clean it up. But if you can allow yourself to write uncensored, you can generate a lot of writing, a lot of content. Some of it's going to be garbage, that's fine. But not all of it is going to be garbage. And the idea is that it gets your juices flowing, your thinking on and around your research topic, on and around your results. So there are probably going to be nuggets in there that when you go back, you can pull out and expand on them when you're doing some more formal writing. Okay, so 15 minutes a day, it's not much. Maybe it does feel like a lot for you. And if that's the case, try 10. Okay. And maybe you have to find those 10 minutes in like a locked bathroom somewhere. I don't know, whatever your circumstances are. Maybe you do best with a notebook and a pen to do your free writing, and that's okay too. Whatever works for you. But the goal is words on paper, because it gets you back in the habit of writing. And if you're working on your results chapter, you've probably been out of the habit of writing for at least a little while. Okay. If you are still stuck, that's where we come in. This is why we do what we do. We have all been here. We know the process. We've written our own dissertations. We've conducted our own research. We know what it's like. We know the sticking points. Okay, so we are Statistics Solutions. I'm Rachel. I'm a qualitative mentor. Statistics Solutions is a full service dissertation consulting, editing company. We are here to help get you through the process. Okay. Again, anywhere from topic development all the way through to helping to develop your presentation and talking points for your dissertation defense at the very end, and everywhere in between. So again, we do offer a complimentary 30-minute consultation during our business hours. You can schedule that by emailing info@statisticsolutions.com. You can give us a call if you don't want to interact with a human. On our website, there's a link where you can self-schedule for a time that works the best for you, and we'll give you a call at that scheduled time. But we're here to help. Our website, for those who came in late, we have so many amazing complementary resources related to the dissertation, all stages of the dissertation, not just qualitative research, but quantitative as well. We have a blog. We have a lot of information about methods, design, different analyses, all of that information. You will also all receive, as attendees, copy of this webinar tomorrow and the slide deck, so that will be made available to you. You can check out our upcoming webinars on our website, statisticsolutions.com. You can also take a look at our archived webinars as well. So there's really, anything you could possibly need, it's available to you, and we are here to help. We have qualitative mentors, quantitative mentors, research mentors to help with things like your literature review. So we do have some time for question and answers now. If you have questions, please put those into the question and answer box so that I can read those and answer them for everyone. Again, you can pop any questions that you have related to this webinar into the question and answer box. I'll get those answered. You don't see anything coming in. Hope everybody's back in the swing of fall semester at this point, as much as possible, given our new normal. I have a question about what's the best way to sound like an expert when presenting your results when you're not confident? Oh, this is such a good question. So, I mean, there are really a couple of things. Whatever you can do to kind of pump yourself up, I think is really helpful. I do see this sort of, what we call imposter syndrome a lot. It's very common. It is very difficult to get over. And it does make us feel like we're not confident. I think what I would really recommend is reminding yourself you are the expert. When you're presenting your results, no one's done your study but you, right? The reason that you are conducting your study is because no one has done it before, right? So you are the expert at this point. People are going to have questions, say, at your dissertation, viva or defense. I really like the European way of calling it the viva because it doesn't sound so, well, defensive. But have confidence because you are the expert. What you found, is correct if you have followed your methodology and followed your trustworthiness, and all of that. So you are the expert when you present your results. Little pep talks can really help. I have a question about interpretative phenomenological analysis, IPA. Yeah, it's just a type of qualitative research design. It is obviously in the phenomenological tradition, but it deals a little bit more with sort of how participants interpret and then how the researcher interprets the results and the participants' experiences and the participants' interpretations of the experience. So they call it double hermeneutic that, first there's the participant interpretation and then there's the researcher interpretation. So there's some good resources out there for the specifics of the data analysis approach. It's just, it's a specific type of design that follows kind of a set, design methods, data collection and analysis techniques. Have another question on, do we need examples of interviews transcribed in the appendix? That's a great question. I cannot say with certainty. That would be one that you would want to check with your chair or your department. I have seen some schools who do require some example of a transcribed interview. Not all schools require this, so I can't be the one to tell you for sure, but definitely check with your dissertation chair or supervisor about that one. Other questions? I have a question about what should we be asking that we may be missing? And I'm not entirely sure what you mean by that. Like of me, of your chair. And certainly in this webinar, I have included, this is really from years of working with students, you know, and so a compilation both of what should go into and be included in a results chapter, but also, again, those particular sticking points. I think probably, okay, so what are typical mistakes people make in this chapter? I think I think the biggest mistake that I see is people not following directions, honestly. You know, if you're looking to minimize feedback, the very first thing that you need to do is make sure that if there is a checklist for what needs to be included in the chapter, you follow that to a T. Okay, because the quickest way to get your manuscript or your document kicked back to you and nobody's looked at it is if you haven't followed the directions. So if there is a checklist, if there is a template from your school or your department or things that your chair has told you need to be included in the chapter, make sure that you include those. Other things, honestly, really, really can vary. You know, I see conflicting feedback for, not conflicting feedback, but, you know, some chairs want a focus on one thing and other chairs want a focus on another thing. One chair from one school will say you've included too many quotes, cut these down. You only need a couple of quotes to illustrate this. Another chair from another school will say include the full quote, include every full quote. You know, that's really important that we have, you know, all of the data. So so in a lot of ways, it really does come down to just do what your chair wants. Sometimes I realize that is a little easier said than done as well, and can depend kind of on your relationship with your chair and people on your committee and things like that. But ultimately, they're also signing off on your graduation and your diploma and your PhD in general. So that's the most, I think, common mistake that I see people make. Are there other questions I can answer today? Okay, I have a question on how do you move forward with your research when you have limited or outdated data? Yeah, that's tricky. I probably don't have a good answer for you other than that is something I would definitely be talking with your chair about and discussing, you know, and sort of depending on where your data came from, if you conducted data collection, or, you know, if data comes from another source, this is something you can collect again. I would probably say, you know, defer to your chair or your supervisor on that one to handle it. I have another question on how to format a mixed methods results chapter. Usually what I see is a section on the qualitative results, a section on the quantitative results, and then a section that brings the qualitative and the quantitative together. So it's usually easiest if you do one, then the other, then both. Other questions? I don't see anything else coming in. So go forth, be confident. You're the expert. You know the results. You're the one conducting the research. You can do this. Start small if you need to. Just get back in the habit of writing, thinking about your study, your research, your results. But it's absolutely doable, and we are here to help if you need us. Thanks so much for joining me today. Best wishes. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.